Amelia Whitmore's hand shot out and grabbed the sleeping stranger by the collar, yanking him half off the couch before her eyes were even fully open. "Who are you? What did you do to me last night?" The most feared CEO in America was trembling, and Amelia Whitmore never trembled. But the man didn't shove her away. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at her with tired, honest eyes and said the one thing no one in her billion-dollar world had ever said to her face. "I don't know what happened either. But whatever it was, I will never use it against you." And that was the exact moment everything she believed about people started to fall apart. Before we go further, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Subscribe and follow along because the truth about that morning is not what anyone thinks. Amelia Whitmore opened her eyes to a ceiling she did not recognize, and the first thought that crawled through the fog in her head was a single cold word. Wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The mattress was too soft. The light was coming from the wrong side. The air smelled like fresh linen and expensive floor polish, and faintly like a man's cologne that was not one she owned. Her head throbbed with a slow, ugly pulse, the kind of pain that told her she had lost time. And Amelia Whitmore did not lose time. She scheduled it. She sold it. She fought wars over 15-minute increments in boardrooms that decided the fates of thousands of people. She did not simply wake up somewhere and not know how she got there. She pushed herself up on one elbow, and that was when she saw him. A man. Asleep on the couch across the room. One arm thrown over his eyes, one foot still on the floor, as though he had sat down for a moment and been ambushed by exhaustion. He was fully dressed. A plain shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. No jacket. No tie. No watch on his wrist, and Amelia noticed the wrists of every man she ever met, because a watch told her exactly what a man wanted her to believe about himself. This man wore nothing that wanted anything. Her heart began to hammer. She looked down at herself. The evening dress from the gala was still on, crumpled, the fabric twisted at her hip. Her shoes were by the door. Her earrings were on the nightstand, lined up neatly side by side the way she always placed them, but she did not remember placing them. That detail frightened her more than anything else, because it meant that at some point last night, she had been calm enough or careful enough to take off her earrings and set them down in a straight line. And she remembered none of it. She reached for her phone. 41 missed calls. Her hand actually shook as she read the number. 41. In her entire career, the only time her phone had lit up like that was the morning her father died and the morning the company nearly collapsed in the 19 crash. 41 calls meant fire. It meant something had happened that the world already knew about, and she was the last person alive to find out. She didn't scroll the messages. Her eyes went straight back to the man. And then some old hard instinct took over the instinct that had kept a woman alive and standing at the top of a company full of people who would happily push her off. And Amelia crossed the room in 3 fast steps, grabbed the stranger by the collar, and hauled him halfway off the couch. "Who are you?" Her voice came out low and lethal. "What did you do to me?" The man's eyes snapped open. For 1 second, 1 single second, she saw the confusion of a man dragged out of deep sleep. And then it cleared. He didn't fight her grip. He didn't grab her wrist and twist it away the way a dangerous man would. He didn't cower and stammer the way a guilty man would. He just held very still, looking up at her, and let her hold his collar in her white-knuckled fist. "Easy," he said quietly. "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you. That's not what I asked." She tightened her grip. "Who are you?" "Calvin," he said. "My name is Calvin Brooks." "I've never heard that name in my life." "No," he agreed. "I don't imagine you have." That threw her. She had expected fear. She had expected a scramble, an excuse, a line baby. "Don't you remember? We had such a great night." She had seen that move 100 times from 100 men who thought they could get a piece of her by making her doubt herself. She had a whole armory built for that exact attack. But this man just lay there in her fist and looked at her like she was the one he was worried about. "Let me sit up," Calvin said. "You can keep your hand right there if it makes you feel safer. But my back's been on that couch all night, and I'm too old to be twisted sideways." She didn't let go, but she let him rise. He sat up slowly, and she rose with him still gripping the collar until they were both on the edge of the couch. Close, her knuckles pressed against his throat. "Tell me what happened," she said. "I would," he said, "if I knew." "Don't." "I'm not lying to you. Everybody lies to me." "Then I guess I'll be the first one who doesn't." He said it plainly, no drama in it the way another man might tell you the time. "I woke up in this room the same as you did. I don't remember getting here. I don't remember how the night ended. The last clear thing I've got is standing on a terrace, and after that it's all torn up." A terrace. Her mind clawed at the word. A terrace. There had been a terrace. Hadn't there cool air? City lights below. The feeling of the railing under her palms. But the memory was a photograph left out in the rain, the colors bleeding into each other until nothing held its shape. "You don't remember either," Calvin said. It wasn't a question. He was watching her face. "You've got the same hole in your night that I do. Stop reading me. I'm not reading you. I'm just looking at you." He paused. "You're scared. That's all right. I'd be scared too if I woke up somewhere strange next to a stranger and couldn't remember why." "I am not scared." The lie came out automatically, armor snapping into place. "I am furious. There's a difference." "Okay," Calvin said gently. "You're furious." And something in the way he simply let her have it, let her have the lie, didn't argue, didn't try to win, made her hand loosen on his collar without her permission. She caught it happening and forced her grip tight again, angry at her own fingers. "My phone has 41 missed calls on it," she said. "Do you understand what that means?" "No, but I understand it's got you rattled. It means something happened last night that I can't remember, and the entire world already knows about it before I do." She stood up abruptly, pacing away from him, dragging both hands back through her hair. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Calvin considered the question honestly. "No," he said. "Should I?" She stopped pacing. She actually stopped and turned and stared at him. Because in 20 years, no one had answered that question with a simple, unbothered no. People fell over themselves to prove they knew her. They dropped her name at parties. They pretended to have met her before. They inflated a single handshake into a friendship into a partnership. The whole world spent its energy trying to convince Amelia Whitmore that it recognized her. This man had no idea, and worse or maybe better, he didn't seem to care to find out. "My name is Amelia Whitmore," she said, watching him closely, testing him. "I run Whitmore Global." Nothing moved in his face. Not greed, not fear, not that little flare of calculation she had learned to spot at 50 paces, the flicker that meant a man had just realized he was standing next to money and was doing the math on how to get some. "All right," Calvin said. "Amelia, nice to meet you, I think, under the circumstances." She let out a short, disbelieving breath that was almost a laugh. "You don't know the company." "Should I know the company?" "It's a technology firm. It's worth several $billion. My face has been on the cover of magazines you have almost certainly walked past in a grocery store." "I don't read those magazines," Calvin said without apology. "I mostly read whatever my daughter's teacher sends home in her backpack." And there it was, the first crack in the wall, though she didn't know yet, that's what it was. My daughter. He said it so easily. Not as a play, not to seem softer or safer or more sympathetic. He said it the way a man says the thing that is simply permanently true about him, the fact that sits underneath every other fact. But Amelia was still in the war she thought she was fighting, and in that war, a man mentioning a child was just another card. "Nice," she said coldly. "The daughter. That's a good touch. You bring her up now so I feel guilty, so I lower my guard. Very smooth." Calvin looked at her for a long moment. And then, for the first time, something changed in his eyes. Not anger, Something quieter and heavier. A kind of tiredness that had nothing to do with a bad night's sleep on a couch. "Lady," he said, "I don't know what your life is like. Sounds complicated. Sounds like a lot of people have tried to run games on you. I'm sorry about that. I really am. But I need you to hear me one time, and then I won't say it again." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees, and held her eyes. "I am not running a game. I don't want your money. I don't want your company. I don't want a story to sell or a favor to call in or a picture to hold over your head. When we figure out how to walk out of this room, I am going to go home to a 7-year-old girl who thinks the sun rises and sets on me. And I am going to make her breakfast, and this, whatever this is going to be over. That's all I want. That's the whole list." The room went silent. Amelia stood there, and she found to her own irritation that she believed him. Not entirely. Not with the part of her mind that had been burned enough times to keep a low, permanent suspicion of everyone. But some other part of her. Some part she thought she had killed off years ago looked at this tired man in his rolled-up sleeves and believed every word. She hated that. "Fine," she said. "Then let's figure out how to walk out of this room." She snatched her phone off the nightstand and finally made herself look at the messages. The first one was from Diane, her chief of staff. It was one line, all capitals, "Call me the second you're awake. It's bad." The second was from Diane again. "Amelia, please." The third was from Marcus Reed, the chairman of her board, and it was longer, and it was colder, and reading it, Amelia felt the floor tilt under her. "We need to discuss the photographs before this gets any further out of control. The board is already talking. Whatever this is, you should have come to us first." "Photographs," she said out loud. "What?" Calvin was on his feet now. She didn't answer. Her thumb was already moving, opening the messages, and then opening the one thing every crisis in her life eventually came down to, the picture that would tell her how bad this really was. It loaded. And Amelia Whitmore, who had stared down hostile takeovers and federal regulators and a room full of men who wanted her chair, felt the blood drain out of her face. It was a photo of the two of them, her and Calvin. On the terrace she almost remembered. It was dark, but the flash or the streetlight had caught them clearly. Her head was on his shoulder. His arm was around her. Her hand was gripping the front of his shirt, and even in the grainy image anyone could see that she was crying, that the untouchable CEO of Whitmore Global was crying against a strange man's chest in the middle of the night. The headline stamped across it read, "Billionaire CEO's Secret Night with Mystery Man." She sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "What is it?" Calvin crossed to her. He didn't touch her. She noticed that even in her panic, that he stopped a careful distance away, but he leaned to see the screen, and she let him because there was no hiding it now. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh no." "That's you," she said numbly. "That's us, on the terrace. Somebody took this. Somebody was standing right there and took a picture," Calvin said. And for the first time, there was an edge in his voice, not at her, but at the faceless somebody. "You were crying. Whatever was going on with you last night, you were crying, and somebody stood there and took a picture instead of asking if you were okay. That's the world I live in," she said. Her voice had gone flat, mechanical. It was the voice she used when things got very bad. The voice that came out when she needed to feel nothing so she could think. "This is what happens. Someone always has a camera. Someone always sells the photo. I know this. I've spent 20 years knowing this." She looked up at him. "But I don't remember it. I don't remember crying. I don't remember you. I don't remember 1 second of whatever that photo is showing me, and now it belongs to everyone. Amelia, they're calling you a mystery man." A short, bitter laugh. "You want to know what happens next? Calvin Brooks, you want to know how this story is about to go? By this afternoon, they'll have your name. By tonight, they'll have your face. Tomorrow, they'll have your whole life, every job you ever had, every mistake you ever made, everything. And they'll build a story where you're the con man who seduced the lonely rich woman because that's the story people like, and the truth won't matter at all." Calvin was quiet. Then he said, "And my daughter's going to see it." That stopped her cold. She had been thinking about her company, her board, her reputation, the fortress she had spent her entire adult life building one careful brick at a time, now cracked open in front of the whole watching world. She had not for 1 second thought about the little girl on the other end of that phone call. "She's 7, Amelia said slowly. "She won't understand." "She's 7, and the other kids' parents read the news," Calvin said. "And kids repeat what they hear at home. And she'll come off that school bus one day, and some kid will say something about her daddy and a rich lady, and she won't understand it, but she'll understand that people are laughing. That's what she'll understand." He wasn't angry when he said it. That was the terrible part. He was just steady, certain. A man mapping the exact shape of the harm coming toward his child, the way he might watch a storm move across the sky toward his house. "I've spent 3 years teaching that little girl that her father is an honest man. And now the whole world's about to tell her something else." Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since she had grabbed him by the collar, she saw him. Not a threat, not a con, not a card in a game. A man, a father, someone who in the middle of his own disaster was thinking first about a child. "I'm sorry," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. She could not remember the last time she had said them and meant them. "It's not your fault," Calvin said. "You didn't take the picture. You didn't ask for any of this any more than I did." He rubbed a hand over his face. "We were just 2 people on a terrace apparently. And now we're a headline." And that was when his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, and Amelia watched a transformation happen so fast and so complete that it silenced her. 1 second, he was the steady, tired man in the crisis. The next second, he saw the name on the screen, and every other thing dropped away, and what was left was pure, undefended love. "It's her," he said. "It's Maya." He looked at Amelia, almost helplessly. "She calls before school. Her aunt watches her in the mornings, but she always calls me before." He stopped. He answered. And his whole voice changed, went warm and light and bright, a completely different instrument. "Hey, sweetheart. Hey. Yeah, Daddy's here." Amelia should have looked away. It was private. But she couldn't. She sat frozen on the edge of the bed and listened to a man she had accused of running a con 3 minutes ago talk to his little girl. "You brushed your teeth, all of them." A soft laugh. "The back ones too, or just the front ones I can see?" He listened. His eyes closed. "That's my girl." "Okay, yeah. Daddy had to work late, that's all. I'm gonna be home soon, I promise. I promise, Maya." There was a silence, while the little voice on the other end said something, and Amelia watched Calvin's throat work. "I know," he said much softer now. "I miss you too. More than all the stars remember, more than all the stars in the whole sky." A pause. "You be good for Aunt Rachel. I'll be there when you get home from school. I'll be right there waiting, okay? Okay, bye-bye, baby, bye-bye." He hung up. He held the phone in both hands for a moment, staring at it, and then he pressed it briefly to his forehead, a small, private gesture that Amelia was certain he had forgotten she could see. Then he put it away and turned back to her, and the steady man was back, but something behind his eyes had been rearranged. "I have to get home," he said. "Whatever we're going to do about all this, I have to get home to her by 3 o'clock. That's not negotiable. That's the one thing that isn't negotiable." Amelia found her voice. "How long has it been just the 2 of you?" Calvin looked at her, and she saw him decide whether to answer. It was a private door, and he did not open it for strangers, and she was still a stranger. But he opened it anyway. 3 years, he said. "Her mother, my wife, got sick. Took 2 years to lose her, and it took everything we had. Everything. The savings, the house, the—" He stopped, breathed, went on. "By the end, I wasn't an engineer anymore. I couldn't be. You can't sit in an office 14 hours a day while your wife is dying and your little girl is scared. So I left the career. I let it go. People acted like I'd lost my mind. Man with my qualifications walking away." He shook his head slowly. But I wasn't losing anything. I was choosing. I chose them. I'd choose it again 100 times out of 100. And after? Amelia asked. She hadn't meant to. The question came out of her before she could stop it. After your wife, after Sarah died, Calvin said, giving the name back to the story because Sarah had a name and he was not going to let her be an after your wife. It was just me and Maya, and I needed work I could do around a little girl's whole life. So I opened a repair shop. Small, nothing fancy. I fix things, appliances, electronics, whatever people bring in. It's honest work. It pays the bills mostly. And it means I'm the one who drops her at school, and I'm the one who picks her up, and I don't miss the school play, and I don't miss the parent-teacher night, and I don't miss the birthday. That's the deal I made. That's the whole life. Amelia sat very still. She thought about her own life, the billion-dollar deals, the board meetings, the words she chose so carefully in front of the cameras. The apartment at the top of the tower with the view of the whole city where no one waited for her, where the only sound when she came home at 11 at night was her own footsteps on the floor. She thought about the fact that if she vanished tomorrow, thousands of people would care very much about what happened to the company, and almost no one would think to wonder whether she was all right. And here was a man who had walked away from everything she had spent her life chasing, and he had done it on purpose, and he did not look like a man who had lost. He looked like a man who had won something she didn't even know how to want. "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "There's nothing to understand," Calvin said. "I'm about the simplest man you'll ever meet." "No," Amelia said. "That's exactly why I don't understand you." Her phone buzzed again in her hand. Diane. She almost didn't answer. And then the professional in her, the machine that had run her life for 2 decades, took over because there was a fire, and she was the only one who could put it out. "Diane," she said, standing, turning her back to Calvin, her voice sliding smoothly into its command register. "Yes, I've seen it. I'm fine. Where am I? I'm at a hotel. I don't—" "Diane, listen to me. I need you to stop talking and answer one question. How bad is the board?" She listened. Her jaw tightened. "Reed called an emergency session," she repeated mostly to herself, "for this afternoon, over a photograph." Her free hand curled into a fist at her side. "No. No, you tell Marcus Reed that I will be there, and that he does not get to hold a session about my conduct without me in the room. That's not how this works. That has never been how this works." A pause. "The man in the photo, he's—" She stopped. She turned and looked at Calvin, who was standing quietly by the couch, giving her privacy. Not eavesdropping a man in a stranger's crisis, trying to take up as little room as possible. "He's no one," she said into the phone. "He's a private citizen who has nothing to do with the company, and I will not have his name dragged into a corporate matter. Do you understand me, Diane? Whatever the board wants to say about me, that's fair game. That's the job. But that man stays out of it. That's an order." She hung up before Diane could argue. Calvin was looking at her. "You didn't give them my name," he said. "No. Why not? Would have been easy. You could have handed them a story right there. He came on to me. I was vulnerable. It's not my fault. You could have made the whole thing my problem and walked away clean." He wasn't accusing her. He was studying her the way she had been studying him, both of them trying to solve the same strange puzzle. What kind of person is this, really? "Why didn't you—" Amelia didn't answer right away, because the honest answer was that she didn't fully know. 24 hours ago, she would have handed him to the wolves without a flicker of guilt. That was the arithmetic of her world. You protected yourself always first, and the people who got hurt in the crossfire were simply the cost of survival. She had made that calculation 100 times. She had built an empire on it. But she had watched this man take a phone call from his daughter. She had watched him say more than all the stars. She had watched him press the phone to his forehead when he thought no one could see, and she had understood in that one unguarded moment that if she threw him to the wolves, the thing that got eaten wasn't a stranger. It was a 7-year-old's belief that her father was an honest man. "Because," Amelia said finally, "you told me you wouldn't use last night against me. And I believed you. And it turns out, her voice caught just slightly, and she was furious at it for catching. It turns out I'm not willing to be a worse person than the stranger on the couch. Calvin's expression softened. That's a good reason, he said. It's a stupid reason. It'll probably cost me the company. Then it's a stupid reason and a good reason at the same time, Calvin said. Those are usually the ones worth having. She almost smiled. She caught it before it happened. I have to go, she said, gathering herself, sliding back into the armor, reaching for her shoes. I have to be at that meeting in 3 hours, and I have to walk in looking like a woman who has everything under control, which means I have to go home first and turn back into her, into Amelia Whitmore, CEO, the version of me that doesn't cry on terraces. She looked at him. You have to go home to your daughter. I do. So this is where two people who can't remember their own night say goodbye and never see each other again, she said. That's how it should go. That's the clean version. You disappear before they get your name. You protect your little girl, and I go fight my board, and in a month, this is a story nobody remembers. Is that what you want? Calvin asked. The question landed strangely in the room. Is that what you want? Not is that the smart move. Not is that the safe play. He was asking her what she wanted, as if that were a thing that mattered, as if the wants of Amelia Whitmore, the woman, and not the office, were a real quantity that deserved a place in the decision. She could not remember the last time anyone had asked her that. What I want doesn't come into it, she said. It never does. That's a sad way to run a life, Calvin said quietly. It's an effective way to run a company. You're not a company. 3 words. He said them so simply, without weight, without meaning them to be the blade they turned out to be. You're not a company. And Amelia Whitmore, standing there in her wrinkled gala dress, with her shoes in her hand, and 41 missed calls in her phone, and her whole fortress cracking open in the morning light, felt something in her chest come loose that she had spent 20 years bolting down. She didn't cry. She would not give the morning that. But she stood there for a moment, breathing carefully, holding it in the way she had learned to hold everything in. And Calvin, bless him or damn him, did not fill the silence. He didn't rush to say something wise. He just let her stand there and feel whatever she was feeling, the way he'd let her have the lie about being furious, the way he'd let her keep her hand on his collar until she was ready to let go. I don't know what happened last night, she said at last, her voice very quiet. But I think whatever it was the first real thing that's happened to me in a long time. And I can't even remember it. Then maybe, Calvin said, we owe it to ourselves to find out what it was. She looked at him. You said you wanted to disappear, she said. Protect your daughter, make her breakfast, never see me again. That was the whole list. It was, Calvin agreed. And I meant it. He picked his jacket up off the arm of the couch. But then you went and didn't give them my name when it would have saved you. And a man's got to answer that. Where I'm from, when somebody protects you at a cost to themselves, you don't just walk away and let them take the beating alone. He shrugged. Even if you can't remember why they did it. Amelia stared at him for a long moment. And then for the first time all morning, she did the thing she had been fighting off since she opened her eyes in the wrong room. She let herself trust someone. There's security footage, she said suddenly. Hotels like this, there are cameras everywhere. The lobby, the elevators, the terrace. If we were here last night, there's a record of every minute of it. There's a record of what actually happened. She was already moving now, mind racing, the machine re-engaging, but pointed at something new. The photograph is 1 frame, 1 second. Someone took 1 second of a whole night and sold it as the story. But the cameras have all of it. The cameras have the truth. Then we get the footage, Calvin said. It's not that simple. Hotels don't just hand over security footage because a guest asks. It's private. It's protected. There are lawyers. You've got lawyers, Calvin pointed out. Whole floors of them, I'd guess. I do. Then this is the one time it helps that you're Amelia Whitmore of Whitmore Global and not just some woman who woke up confused. A small, dry smile. Use the machine for something you actually want for once. And that, of all the things he had said, was the one that broke through completely. Because he was right. She had a machine. A vast, powerful, terrible machine, and she had spent 20 years feeding it, and serving it, and protecting it. And here was a man suggesting the radical idea that maybe just once the machine could serve her, could be pointed at the truth instead of the image, could be used to protect a stranger's daughter and a lonely woman's dignity instead of a stock price. "Okay," Amelia said. Her voice had steadied now, hardened into something new, something that wasn't quite the CEO, and wasn't quite the crying woman on the terrace, but some third thing that was starting just barely to take shape. "Okay, here's what happens. You go home. You be there when your daughter gets off that bus exactly like you promised her. You don't miss it. Not for me, not for the board, not for any of this. And you, I go home. I turn back into her. And I walk into that boardroom this afternoon, and I do not let a single one of those men see me flinch." She pulled on her shoes, straightened her spine, and for a moment the transformation was visible, the armor sliding back over her like a second skin. "And then I am going to get that footage. I'm going to find out what actually happened on that terrace. And when I know the truth," she looked at him, "I'll find you. And I'll tell you. Because you're right. You didn't ask for any of this, and your little girl doesn't deserve to grow up in a lie somebody built out of one photograph." Calvin nodded slowly. "That's a plan," he said. "It's a plan." He walked to the door, put his hand on the handle. And then he stopped and turned back and looked at her one more time, the powerful woman in the wrinkled dress standing in the wreckage of a morning neither of them could explain, already squaring her shoulders for a fight. "Amelia," he said. "What?" "Whatever that footage shows," Calvin said, "you don't have anything to be ashamed of. I don't know the whole night any better than you do. But I know I found a person on a terrace who was hurting bad enough to cry in front of a stranger. And there's no shame in hurting. There's no shame in letting somebody see it." He paused. "Whoever told you there was, they were wrong, and they weren't your friend." And then he opened the door and was gone. And Amelia Whitmore stood alone in the penthouse with 41 missed calls. One devastating photograph, 3 hours until the fight of her life, and the strangest feeling she had ever felt. The feeling of a wall she had built so long ago that she'd forgotten it was a wall. Quietly, for the first time in 20 years, beginning to come down. She looked at the door for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, and instead of calling Diane, instead of calling her lawyers, instead of doing any of the 1,000 things the machine demanded, she did something she had not done in longer than she could remember. She stood still in the quiet and let herself feel it. The fear, the relief, the strange, terrible, wonderful fact that somewhere in a night, she couldn't remember, a stranger had held her while she cried and asked for nothing in return. And then, because she was still Amelia Whitmore, and the fight was still coming, she wiped her eyes, lifted her chin, and went to war. The drive home took 40 minutes, and Amelia spent every one of them on the phone rebuilding the fortress one call at a time. "Diane, I need 3 things before that meeting," she said, the city sliding past the tinted window she wasn't looking at. "First, I need the hotel's general counsel on the phone by noon. Not a manager, their lawyer. Second, I need to know exactly who leaked that photograph and who bought it. Somebody sold it and somebody paid, and both of those people have names. Third," she paused. "Third, I need you to pull every file we have on my movements last night. Car logs, card charges, anything with a timestamp on it. I have a hole in my memory, and I intend to fill it. Amelia." Diane's voice was careful. "Can I ask you something, and can you not bite my head off?" "No promises." "Are you okay? And I don't mean the company, I mean you. You disappeared last night. You didn't answer your phone for 11 hours. That's not Amelia, that's not you. You've never once in 6 years gone dark like that. I was about to call the police." Amelia closed her eyes. "I'm okay," she said, and was surprised to find it was almost true. "Something happened last night, Diane. Something with Harold, and I didn't handle it the way I usually handle things." There was a silence on the line. "Harold Vance," Diane said slowly. What about Harold? And there, it was, the edge of the hole. Amelia's mind snagged on the name, and something dark moved underneath the fog, a shape she couldn't quite see, but could feel the way. You feel a stare that isn't there in the dark. Harold Vance. Her partner. Her mentor. The man who'd been at her father's side before she was born, who'd stood up at her father's funeral and put a hand on her shoulder and said, I've got you, kid. I'll always have you. I don't remember all of it, Amelia said. But I remember enough to know that whatever broke last night, Harold broke it. Get me the files, Diane. All of them. I'll know more when I see the timestamps. She hung up. And for a moment, before she could stop it, a single clear image surfaced out of the fog, a document on a screen, a signature that wasn't supposed to be there, and Harold's voice saying, You were always going to find out eventually, Amelia. I just hoped it'd be after I was gone. Then it was gone again, back under the water. She pressed her fingers to her temple and made herself breathe. By the time she walked into her own apartment at the top of the tower, she had 30 minutes to become a different woman. She showered the night off her skin. She put on the armor, the charcoal suit, the one she wore when she needed men to be a little afraid of her. She pulled her hair back so tight it made her eyes sharp. She looked at herself in the mirror, and she did not see the woman who had woken up crying in a stranger's penthouse. She saw the CEO. The machine's true face. But even as she fixed her collar, her mind was two places at once, half of it walking into the boardroom, and half of it standing at a door, watching a tired man in rolled-up sleeves turn back to say, You don't have anything to be ashamed of. Her phone buzzed. A text. Not Diane. A number she didn't have saved. It's Calvin. Got your number off the hotel intake form. We both signed one last night, apparently, even if we don't remember it. Made it home. Maya doesn't know anything yet. Whatever happens in your meeting, keep your chin up. You've handled worse than a room full of men in suits. C. Amelia read it twice. She almost didn't reply. Replying meant this was real, meant the stranger from the couch had a place in her actual life, meant she was letting the two worlds touch. Every instinct she'd built over 20 years said, delete it, block the number, protect yourself. She typed, How would you know what I've handled? The reply came fast. I don't. But a woman who grabs a stranger by the collar first thing in the morning isn't somebody who scares easy. Go win. She stared at the screen, and something in her chest did a small unfamiliar thing. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went to war. The boardroom of Whitmore Global was on the 44th floor, and when Amelia walked in, all 12 of them were already seated, and the conversation stopped. The way conversations stop when the person being discussed arrives. She saw it in their faces before anyone said a word, the careful blankness of people who had spent the last hour deciding her fate. At the head of the table where he had no right to be sat, Marcus Reed. Amelia, Reed said, rising with a smile that had nothing behind it. We're glad you could join us. You're in my chair, Marcus, she said pleasantly, and did not sit down. The smile flickered. I thought, given the circumstances, it might be better if I chaired today's. You thought wrong. She crossed to the head of the table and stood beside him close until the geometry of it became unbearable, and he had no choice but to gather his papers and move. She took her seat. She set her hands flat on the table. She looked slowly around the room at all 12 of them. Now, somebody's called an emergency session about my personal conduct on a Saturday without me. So let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is. Who wants to go first? Nobody spoke. No? Amelia's voice was mild. You were all talking plenty when I walked in. Reed recovered first. He always did. Amelia, no one is trying to attack you. We're trying to protect the company. That's our fiduciary duty and yours. And there is a photograph circulating on every major outlet in the country showing our chief executive in a compromised state in the middle of the night with an unidentified man. The stock opened down 4%. 4%, Amelia. That's real money. That's shareholder money. So you'll forgive us if we felt the situation warranted a conversation. Compromised, Amelia repeated. That's the word you want to use. It's the word the market is using. The photograph shows me crying. She said it flatly and watched several of them look away, because it is one thing to whisper about a woman's tears and another to have her name them out loud to your face. That's what the photograph shows. Not a scandal, not an affair, a woman crying. Since when is that a crime that costs 4% BCNE? Since that woman runs a $9 billion company, said a voice from down the table. Eleanor Cho. Sharp, cold, ambitious, the youngest member of the board, and Amelia had long suspected the one with the longest knife. Perception is the asset, Amelia. You taught us that. You've said it in this very room. The market doesn't buy our products, it buys our confidence. And right now, the market is looking at a picture of you falling apart in a stranger's arms and wondering if the person running their investment is falling apart too. I'm not falling apart, Eleanor. Then explain the picture. And there it was. The trap laid clean and simple in the middle of the table. Explain the picture. Tell us who he is. Give us the story. Hand us the man or hand us your weakness, but give us something we can use to make this go away. And whichever you give us, we win, because either you throw a stranger to the wolves and prove you're still one of us, or you protect him and prove you've gone soft. Amelia understood that trap perfectly. She had built traps exactly like it. And 24 hours ago, she would have known precisely how to escape it, because 24 hours ago, she'd have simply thrown Calvin Brooks to the wolves without a flicker and walked out clean. But she'd watched a man take a phone call from his daughter. I'm not going to explain the picture, Amelia said. The room shifted. Amelia, Reed started. I'm not going to explain the picture, she said again louder. Because the man in it is a private citizen who has nothing to do with this company, who asked me for nothing, who wants nothing, and who does not deserve to have his life torn apart because 12 people in a boardroom need a name to feed to a news cycle. She looked at Eleanor. You want to talk about the asset, fine. Let's talk about the asset. The asset is my judgment. That's what the market's really buying, the belief that the person in this chair makes good decisions. And I'm making one right now. I'm deciding that I will not sacrifice an innocent man to protect a stock price. If that costs us 4% today, then the market can adjust, because a CEO who would throw an innocent person to the wolves to save 4% is a far more dangerous asset than one who won't. That's the truth, and every one of you knows it, and you're just angry that I said it out loud. Silence. Then Eleanor Cho smiled thin and satisfied, like a woman watching a trap close exactly as she'd planned. That's a beautiful speech, Amelia, she said. It really is. But it isn't leadership. It's sentiment. And sentiment is a luxury the person in that chair doesn't get to afford. She turned to the room. I move that we begin a formal review of the CEO's fitness to continue in her role effective immediately pending resolution of the current reputational crisis. I further move that we appoint an interim committee to oversee crisis communications, a committee that does not include Amelia, so that the company's response is not compromised by the CEO's personal involvement in the matter. Seconded, said Reed so fast that Amelia understood with a cold drop in her stomach that it had all been arranged in advance. The photo. The emergency session. Reed in her chair. Eleanor's knife. This wasn't a reaction to a crisis. It was an ambush that had simply been waiting for a crisis, and last night had handed them one gift-wrapped. She looked around this table, doing the count the way she'd done 1,000 counts reading the faces. Reed, Eleanor. She could see 4 more who'd go with them. 3 who were terrified and would vote with whoever seemed strongest. And 2 old Bill Hartley and quiet Naomi Foss, who might still be hers. It was going to be close. It was going to be very close. And she was walking in wounded on no sleep with a hole in her memory, defending herself over a night she couldn't even remember. Before you vote, Amelia said, I have one question, and I want it on the record. Reed folded his hands. Go ahead. Who brought the photograph to this board? The question landed like a stone in still water. I don't see how that's relevant, Eleanor said, but something flickered behind her eyes, just a flicker quickly buried. "It's relevant," Amelia said slowly, "because that photograph appeared online at 6:47 this morning, according to the timestamp. But this emergency session was scheduled at 6:15. She let that sit. She watched it land on every face at the table. The meeting was called 32 minutes before the photograph was public. So somebody in this room had the picture before the world did. Somebody in this room was ready. Which means somebody in this room either took that photograph or paid for it, or was promised it, and then used it to spring a trap they'd been building for a long, long time. The room had gone dead silent. "That's quite an accusation," Reed said, but his voice had lost some of its ease. "It's not an accusation. It's arithmetic." Amelia's eyes moved slowly around the table and settled at last on Eleanor Cho, who was holding very, very still. "It's just numbers, and I'm very good with numbers. So before anyone votes on my fitness, I'd think carefully about whose fitness the shareholders would really want examined if they knew the sequence of events. A CEO who cried on a terrace, or a board member who bought the picture of her crying and weaponized it before the ink was dry." Eleanor's smile was gone now. "You can't prove that," she said quietly. "Not yet," Amelia agreed. "But I have lawyers on floors 40 through 42 who have nothing to do all weekend, and I have a hotel's general counsel taking my call at noon, and I have a very simple question about who requested a copy of a certain security-adjacent image and when. You've all seen how I am when I decide to find something out." She leaned back in her chair. "So, do you still want to vote, or would you rather table the motion and let me go find out exactly what happened last night, all of it from the beginning, before this board does something it can't take back?" The vote did not happen. It should have. Eleanor had the momentum, had the count had the ambush laid clean. But Amelia had done the one thing they hadn't planned for. She'd stopped defending herself and started hunting. And a board full of people who'd been ready to circle a wounded animal suddenly realized the animal wasn't wounded the way they'd thought, and nobody wanted to be the first to find out what she'd do when she was cornered. Bill Hartley cleared his throat. "I move we table the motion for 72 hours, the old man said, "and reconvene when we have more facts. All these facts, including the timeline Amelia's raised." "Seconded," said Naomi Foss immediately, and the trap which had been so beautifully built came apart in Amelia's hands. She walked out of that boardroom on legs that only started shaking once the door was safely shut behind her, and Diane was there in the hall with a tablet and a look of open astonishment. "What happened in there?" Reed came out looking like he swallowed a hornet. "I bought us 72 hours, Amelia said. She kept walking fast, needing to be moving. "That's all. 72 hours before they come back, and next time they'll be smarter, and next time I won't have a bluff to play. So we have 3 days to find out what actually happened last night, and 3 days to figure out who on my own board bought a photograph of me crying." She stopped, turned. "Diane, that thing about Harold, about the files. Where are we?" Diane's face changed. "That's the other thing," she said. "The reason I've been trying to reach you all morning wasn't just the photo. It was this." She turned the tablet around. Amelia looked, and the fog in her memory tore open all at once, and the whole night came flooding back. She'd been at the gala, the annual thing, the one she hated, the one where she smiled for photographs and made small talk with people who wanted her money, and Harold had come to find her. Harold Vance, her father's partner, her mentor, the closest thing to family she had left, and he'd taken her aside to a quiet corner, and he'd had a strange look on his face, an old man's guilt, and he'd said, "Amelia, before you hear it from someone else, I need you to hear it from me." And then he'd told her, for 6 years, 6 years Harold had been quietly moving money. Not stealing exactly. Worse than stealing. He'd been using the company's name, the company's credit, the trust that Amelia's own face had built to guarantee a series of private ventures that were failing one after another, a slow avalanche of bad bets papered over with borrowed time. And it had finally caught up with him. The whole thing was days from collapsing. And when it collapsed, it wouldn't just take Harold. It would take Whitmore Global with it, because Harold had tied the two together so tightly that pulling one down pulled the other. Everything her father had built, everything Amelia had spent her life protecting, all of it hollowed out from the inside by the one man she'd have trusted with anything. "You were always going to find out eventually, Amelia," he'd said. "I just hoped it'd be after I was gone." And Amelia, who controlled billion-dollar deals, who controlled board meetings, who controlled every word in front of every camera, had stood in that corner of the gala and felt her entire world come apart. And for the first time in 20 years, she had not known what to do. So she'd walked out. She'd left her own gala. She'd taken the elevator up to the terrace of the hotel where the party was held because she needed air, because she needed to not be looked at, because the woman who never broke was about to break, and she could not do it in front of 500 people who'd sell the picture. She'd stood at the railing, and she'd cried, and a stranger had found her there. "Oh," Amelia said softly, standing in the hallway with the tablet in her hands. "Oh, Harold. It was Harold." "You remember?" Diane said. "I remember all of it now." Her voice was strange, distant. "The gala. Harold pulling me aside. What he told me." She looked up. "That's why I went dark, Diane. That's why I didn't answer my phone for 11 hours. It wasn't the man in the photograph. He didn't do anything to me. He found me. I was standing on a terrace falling apart because Harold Vance spent 6 years quietly destroying my father's company, and a stranger walked up and stayed with me. That's all the photo is. That's all it ever was. Me breaking and one decent person who didn't walk away." Diane was quiet for a moment. "So what's on the tablet?" Amelia said. "If it's not the photo, what did you find in the files?" "The wire transfers," Diane said. "Harold's been careful, but not careful enough. Once I knew to look, once your text said his name, I found the trail. It's all there, Amelia. 6 years of it. But that's not the part you need to see." She reached over and scrolled the screen. "This is..." Amelia looked, and her blood went cold for the second time that day. Because the most recent transfer, the one from 3 weeks ago, the one that had started the final collapse, hadn't gone to one of Harold's failing ventures. It had gone to a numbered account. And Diane, who had spent all morning digging while Amelia was waking up in a stranger's bed, had traced that account halfway to its owner before she'd hit a wall. The wall had a name. "Eleanor Cho," Amelia breathed. "I can't prove it yet," Diane said. "But the account's connected to a holding company, and the holding company's connected to a law firm, and the law firm has done exactly one other piece of work in the last 2 years, and it was setting up Eleanor Cho's private investment vehicle." She swallowed. "Amelia, I think Harold's collapse and Eleanor's move against you aren't two things. I think they're one thing. I think somebody figured out Harold was in trouble, and instead of stopping it, they fed it, kept it quiet, let it grow, waited for it to get big enough to take you down with it, and then made sure there was a photograph ready for the exact morning it all came due." The hallway was very quiet. Amelia stood there holding the tablet, and she felt something happen inside her that she would think about for a long time afterward. Because the old Amelia, the machine, the fortress, the woman who trusted no one, would have received this news as confirmation. "See? Everyone wants something. Everyone's running a game. You were right never to let anyone in." That was the lesson the old Amelia would have taken. But she'd woken up that morning next to a man who wanted nothing. And so instead of confirmation, what she felt was something closer to clarity, a sudden sharp understanding of exactly how alone she'd let herself become, and exactly how that loneliness had been used against her. They'd built the whole trap on the assumption that no one would be standing beside her. That when the photograph dropped, and the company shook, and the board turned, Amelia Whitmore would have no one, no family, no friend, no soft place to fall, and would go down alone exactly the way she'd lived. They'd been wrong. By an accident of a night, she couldn't remember they'd been wrong. She took out her phone. "Who are you calling?" Diane asked. "The lawyers?" "In a minute," Amelia said. She wasn't calling the lawyers. She was texting Calvin Brooks. And she stood in the hallway of the 44th floor, in her armor, having just survived an ambush, and uncovered a betrayal 6 years deep. And she typed a message to a man she'd met that morning, a repair shop owner who didn't read the magazines. Her face was on. "I remember now," she wrote. "All of it. The night, why I was crying, everything. You didn't do anything to me. You just found me at the worst moment of my life and you stayed. I'm sorry I grabbed you by the collar. Thank you for not walking away." She watched the little dots appear. "You already thanked me," Calvin wrote back. "And you already apologized. You don't have to keep doing it. How'd the meeting go?" "I survived." "Barely. It's worse than I thought. The whole thing was a setup. Someone I trusted for 20 years betrayed me, and someone I never trusted used it to try to take the company. I'm in a war, Calvin, a real one." There was a pause. The dots came and went. Then, "You eat anything today?" Amelia blinked at the screen. "What? Food? Have you eaten? It's almost noon. You woke up in a hotel, you walked into a firing squad, and now you just found out somebody you trusted for 20 years stabbed you in the back. In my experience, people forget to eat on days like that, and you can't fight a war on an empty stomach. So, have you eaten anything, Amelia Whitmore or not?" And Amelia Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global, in the middle of the worst day of her professional life, standing in a hallway with a betrayal in her hand, stared at her phone and felt her eyes sting for reasons that had nothing to do with Harold or Eleanor or the board. Because in 20 years in the middle of 100 crises, not one person had ever asked her if she'd eaten. "Amelia," Diane said, "you okay? You've got a strange look." "I'm fine." Amelia wiped quickly at her eye and typed back, "No, I haven't eaten." "Figured. Okay, go win your war. But eat something first. That's not advice, that's an order. You're not the only one who gets to give those." See. She almost laughed. In the middle of all of it, she almost laughed right there in the hallway. "Diane," she said, putting the phone away, and her voice had changed, steadier now, and underneath the steel, something warmer. Something that hadn't been there that morning. "Get me a sandwich. Anything. I don't care what. And then get me the lawyers and the hotel's counsel and everything you have on Eleanor Cho's holding company. We're going to need all of it." Diane stared at her. "You want a sandwich?" "Somebody reminded me I have to eat," Amelia said. "Apparently you can't fight a war on an empty stomach." She started walking toward her office, and for the first time all day, her stride had its old certainty back. But there was a new thing under it too, a thing the board would not have recognized, a thing that would have terrified Eleanor Cho if she'd seen it. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give them their 72 hours. We're going to let them think they've got me cornered. And in those 72 hours, I'm going to get the security footage from that terrace, and I'm going to trace Eleanor's account all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to find out exactly how much of my own destruction was arranged in advance. And then..." She pushed open her office door. "Then we're not going to defend. We're going to attack. And Harold?" Diane asked quietly. "He's been like family to you, Amelia. Whatever he did, what do we do about Harold?" Amelia stopped in the doorway. The old fury rose up in her, hot and immediate. The betrayal of it, 20 years of trust turned to ash, her father's partner hollowing out her father's company. Part of her wanted to burn him down. Part of her wanted to make him pay for every dollar and every day of it. But she thought about a man on a terrace who'd told her there was no shame in hurting. She thought about "You're not a company." She thought about a father who'd walked away from everything so his daughter could grow up knowing he was honest. "Harold's dying," she said quietly. Diane went still. "What? That's the part I didn't tell you. That's the part I remembered on the drive over." Amelia's voice was low. "He didn't confess last night because he got caught. He confessed because he got a diagnosis. He's got maybe a year. And he didn't want to die with me finding out from a lawyer after he was gone. He wanted to tell me himself. That doesn't excuse what he did. 6 years of it, it doesn't excuse a day of it." She looked down at her hands. "But it complicates it. A dying old man who did a terrible thing and finally told the truth is not the same enemy as a board member who bought a photo of me crying and called an ambush. And I need to be smart enough to know the difference. That's the mistake they want me to make, Diane. They want me so busy being angry at Harold that I don't see Eleanor's knife. They want me to burn the wrong man." Diane was quiet for a long moment. "When did you get like this?" she said finally, and there was something almost like wonder in it. "This morning you woke up in a hotel you couldn't remember getting to. And now you're Amelia, you're thinking 3 moves clearer than I've seen you think in a year. What happened to you last night?" Amelia thought about the answer. She thought about a terrace and a stranger, and nobody should have to carry the whole world alone. She thought about a man who'd asked if she'd eaten. She thought about the strange, terrible, wonderful truth she was only now beginning to understand, that for 6 years she'd been the most alone she'd ever been, and that her enemies had built their entire plan on that loneliness, and that by pure accident, on the one night it mattered most, she hadn't been alone after all. "I met someone," she said, "who reminded me I'm not a company." And then she walked into her office to plan the counterattack that would decide everything. The security footage, the traced account, the 72 hours ticking down, and somewhere across the city, a man picking his daughter up from school at exactly 3 o'clock. Exactly like he'd promised, with no idea that the woman he'd found crying on a terrace was about to pull him all the way into the middle of a war. The 72 hours did not go the way Amelia planned, because on the second morning, the story got worse, and it got worse in the exact way Calvin had predicted it would. They found his name. Diane brought it to her before 8, and Amelia knew from the look on her face that the levee had broken. Someone had matched the man in the terrace photograph to a small business license, and from there, it had all cascaded the way it always did. A name, then a face, then a shop, then a history, then a story, shaped to fit whatever people already wanted to believe. "How bad?" Amelia asked. "They're calling him an opportunist," Diane said. "There's a piece up already. Who is the mystery man in the Whitmore photo? They've got his shop. They've got a photo of the storefront. They're spinning it exactly the way you said they would. Amelia, struggling repair shop owner, widower, single father drowning in debt, and then look, here he is with a billionaire. They're not even being subtle. The subtext is that he saw a wealthy woman crying and moved in." Amelia stood up so fast her chair rolled back into the wall. "That's a lie," she said. "That is a complete lie. He didn't know who I was. He still barely knows who I am. He asked me if I'd eaten Diane. He wasn't." She stopped, made herself breathe. "Do they have the daughter? Tell me they don't have the daughter." "Not yet, but they will. These things always find the kid." Amelia already had her phone out. Calvin answered on the second ring, and she could hear immediately that he already knew, could hear it in the flatness of his voice, the careful control of a man holding something heavy so a child wouldn't see it fall. "They found me," he said. "I know. You don't have to tell me. Calvin, there were 2 of them outside the shop this morning, with cameras. Maya asked me why the men were taking pictures of our store." His voice cracked just slightly on the word Maya. "I told her they were from the newspaper, and they were doing a story about how good we fix things. She believed me. She's 7. She believed me. Amelia and I stood there and lied to my daughter's face, because the truth is, I don't know how to explain to a 7-year-old why grown men are standing outside her home, calling her father a name I won't even repeat." Amelia closed her eyes. "I did this," she said quietly. "You told me. You stood in that room yesterday morning and you told me exactly how this would go, and I let it happen anyway. I pulled you into this. You didn't pull me into anything. I walked onto that terrace on my own 2 feet. Nobody made me." A long breath on the line. "But I won't lie to you. This is bad. This is the thing I was afraid of. The shop people cancel when there's a scandal, Amelia. 2 customers already called this morning to say they'd come back another time. That's how it starts. And I've got maybe 6 weeks of savings, and a little girl, and now the whole internet thinks I'm a con man who preys on crying women." His voice was steady, but underneath it, she heard something she hadn't heard from him before. Fear. Real fear. "I've been poor before. I can do poor. But I can't do watching my daughter grow up thinking her father's the man they're saying he is. That's the one thing I can't do. Then don't, Amelia said. Amelia, listen to me. She was pacing now, fast the machine and the woman finally pulling in the same direction. I have been running the wrong defense. I've been trying to make this quietly go away, protect you by keeping your name out of it, hide you. That was a mistake. You can't hide a man they've already found. So we stop hiding. We do the opposite. We put the truth out in the open, all of it so loud and so complete that their lie has nowhere left to stand. What are you talking about? The security footage, Amelia said. I got it last night. The hotel's counsel released it to my lawyers at midnight. I have every minute of that terrace, Calvin. I have the whole thing. Her voice tightened. I watched it. I watched all of it. Do you know what's on that footage? A pause. No. A woman falls apart at a railing, and a man walks by, sees her and stops. And you can see him thinking about it. You can see him deciding. Because it would have been so easy to keep walking, Calvin. Nobody would have blamed you. Stranger crying at 2 a.m. Not your problem, keep walking. But you didn't. You stopped, and you kept a careful distance so I wouldn't feel cornered, and you asked, I can't hear the audio, but I can read it. I can see you asking if I'm all right. And when I didn't tell you to go away, you came a little closer, and you stayed. For 2 hours, Calvin. The footage runs 2 hours. 2 hours of a man just being there. Never once reaching for my phone. Never once looking around for a camera. Never once doing a single thing except keeping a stranger company while she cried. Her voice was thick now. That's what's on the footage. That's the truth. And I am going to put it in front of the entire world. The line was quiet for a long moment. Amelia, Calvin said slowly, if you release that footage, they'll see everything. They'll see you falling apart. The whole world will watch Amelia Whitmore break down at a railing. That's the thing you've spent 20 years making sure nobody ever sees. You'd be handing them the exact weapon you've been protecting yourself from your whole life. I know. Your board will use it. Eleanor will use it. It's a gift to every person trying to take you down. I know that too. Then why would you do that? Amelia stopped pacing. Because you're worth more than my armor, she said. And the words surprised her even as she said them, because she'd never once in her life put another person ahead of the fortress. And here she was doing it for a repair shop owner she'd known for a day and a half. Because you stopped when you could have kept walking. Because you've got a little girl who's going to grow up either believing the internet or believing the truth. And I get to decide which one, and I am not going to let her grow up thinking her father is a con man to protect a stock price. I did that math yesterday in the boardroom. I'll do it again. Some things cost 4% and they're still worth it. She heard him breathe. I don't know what to say to that, Calvin said finally. Don't say anything. She hesitated. Just trust me. I've spent 20 years asking people to trust the CEO. I'm asking you to trust the woman. There's a difference. You're the one who taught me that. There was a silence, and then Calvin said quietly, Okay, I trust you. 2 words. And Amelia, who had built an empire on the principle that trust was a liability, felt them land in her chest like something she'd been starving for without knowing it. There's something else, Calvin said. Before you do this, there's something you should know, and I should have told you yesterday, but I didn't because I didn't think it mattered. Now I think it might. What? The name of the company that pushed me out, years ago. The one where I found the financial misconduct, reported it, and got run out for my trouble. He paused. I never told you the name. You didn't. It was Vance Holdings, Calvin said. The private firm. I worked there before it got folded into something bigger. My whole engineering career before Sarah got sick, it was building systems for Vance Holdings. And the man who ran it, the man whose name was on the door, the man who signed the order that ended my career because I wouldn't stay quiet about the money. Harold, Amelia whispered. Harold Vance. I didn't know, Calvin said quickly. Amelia, I swear to you I didn't know. When you said his name yesterday, when you said someone you'd trusted for 20 years betrayed you, I didn't put it together until last night, lying awake, going over everything. I never met you before that terrace. I never planned any of this. But the man who destroyed my career 8 years ago and the man who betrayed you 3 weeks ago are the same man. And I don't know what that means. But it can't be nothing. Can it? Amelia sat down slowly. The room seemed to tilt. Because it couldn't be nothing, the odds against it were absurd. And yet, there it was. The stranger on the terrace wasn't a stranger to her world at all. He was a man Harold Vance had already tried to destroy once years before, for the exact same reason Amelia was now uncovering. Because he'd found the money and he'd refused to look away. You reported financial misconduct at Vance Holdings, Amelia said slowly, her mind moving now fast, the pieces turning. 8 years ago. Calvin, what did you find? What exactly did you report? Wire transfers, Calvin said. Money moving out of the operating accounts into private vehicles, papered over as vendor payments. I was building the reconciliation system, so I saw the numbers that didn't add up. When I flagged it, they told me I'd misread it. When I pushed, they offered me a promotion to shut me up. When I wouldn't take it, they found a reason to let me go, and they made sure the reason followed me around so nobody else would hire me. His voice was tight with an old buried anger. I never got to prove it. I had suspicions and half a paper trail and no lawyer I could afford, so I let it go. I had a sick wife and a baby daughter, and I couldn't fight a company that size. I told myself I'd done the right thing by reporting it, and that had to be enough, and I let it go. But you remember the structure, Amelia said. Her heart was pounding now. The way the money moved. The mechanism. Vendor payments that weren't vendor payments. Money into private vehicles. I remember all of it. You don't forget the thing that ended your career. Amelia stood up again. She crossed to her desk to the tablet where Diane had laid out 6 years of Harold's transfers, and she looked at the structure of it, the money moving out as one thing, while it was really another, into numbered accounts, into private vehicles. And she understood with a jolt that ran all the way down her spine that she was looking at the same machine. Calvin, she said very carefully, the thing Harold did to my company, the 6 years of transfers, it's the same mechanism. It's the exact same mechanism you found 8 years ago. He didn't invent something new to steal from me. He used the same system he was already running back then. The same one you caught. The same one they destroyed your career to keep quiet. She pressed a hand to her mouth. You didn't just stumble onto a crime 8 years ago. You stumbled onto the beginning of the one that's happening to me right now. You saw it before anyone. You tried to stop it, and they buried you for it. The line was silent. So, all of this, Calvin said slowly, the terrace, the photo, the war you're in, it goes back to a thing I found 8 years ago. A thing nobody believed. I believe you, Amelia said. And more than that, I can prove you now. Do you understand what that means? For 8 years you've carried this. Everyone thought you were a man who threw his career away, who lost his mind, who walked away from success. Nobody knew you were the one honest man who caught Harold Vance and paid for it. But I have the current transfers. I have the mechanism laid out in front of me. And you have the original, the first version of the crime, the one from 8 years ago with your name on the report you filed. Put those two things together, and it's not one man's word against a company anymore. It's a pattern. It's 8 years of the same crime caught twice by 2 different people and buried once. That's not a scandal, Calvin. That's a case. She heard him let out a long, shaking breath, and she understood distantly that she was hearing a man set down something he'd carried alone for 8 years. Amelia, he said, the men outside my shop. The story calling me a con man. Does this... It changes everything, she said. Because now the story isn't billionaire's mystery man. The story is the whistleblower they destroyed, and the CEO who found out he was right. And that Calvin Brooks is a story I can sell to the entire country. That's a story that doesn't make you a con man. It makes you the only person in this whole mess who told the truth and paid for it twice and never once complained. Her voice caught. I'm going to give you back your name. The real one. The one they took. There was a long pause on the line, and when Calvin spoke again, his voice wasn't steady anymore. You'd do that, he said. You'd stand up in front of everyone and tell them the man in the photo isn't a con man. He's a whistleblower. Harold Vance buried. Even though Harold's dying. Even though it drags your own company's mentor through the mud on his way out. Even though it makes you look like a CEO who didn't notice her own partner robbing her for 6 years. You'd take all of that to give a stranger his name back. You're not a stranger, Amelia said. You keep saying it, and it keeps being less true. She heard him laugh, a small, wet, disbelieving laugh. I have to tell Maya something, he said. The men outside. She's going to ask again. Then tell her the truth, Amelia said. Tell her the men are outside because a long time ago her daddy found some people doing something wrong, and he told on them even though it cost him everything, and now people are finally finding out he was right. Tell her that her father is the kind of man who tells the truth even when it's expensive. She's 7. She'll understand that better than any of the adults in my boardroom. Her voice softened. Tell her the newspaper story is going to change, and when it does, it's going to say her daddy is a hero. Because it is. Because he was. 8 years before I ever met him. The line was quiet, and then Calvin said very low, I'm going to hang up now because I don't want her to hear me. And his voice broke, and he didn't finish, and the call ended. Amelia set down the phone and found Diane staring at her. I got most of that, Diane said carefully. The man in the photo used to work for Harold Vance, and he caught the same fraud 8 years ago that Harold's running now. He caught it first, Amelia said. He caught it before it ever touched us, and they destroyed him to keep it quiet, and he spent 8 years thinking nobody would ever believe him. She looked at the tablet at the transfers at the mechanism she now understood completely. Diane. I need 3 things, and I need them today. 1. I need the legal team to pull the original Vance Holdings whistleblower report Calvin Brooks filed 8 years ago. It'll be in a regulatory filing somewhere buried, but it exists, and I need it. 2. I need you to start building the timeline that connects Calvin's original report to Harold's current transfers mechanism by mechanism so a child could follow it. And 3. She stopped. And 3, Diane prompted. 3. I need to know how far Eleanor is willing to go, Amelia said slowly. Because here's what's been bothering me. Eleanor bought the photo. Eleanor called the ambush. Eleanor's account is tangled up in Harold's last transfer. But Eleanor is not stupid, and this whole plan of hers only works if the man in the photo stays a nameless con man. The second Calvin becomes a sympathetic whistleblower, her whole story collapses. So she has to know that's a risk. Which means she must have a plan for it. Which means... Amelia's phone buzzed. She looked down. A message from an unknown number. Amelia. It's Eleanor. I think it's time you and I had a private conversation before either of us does something we can't undo. There are things about your friend Mr. Brooks that you don't know. Things that will destroy him far more completely than any story running now. And things that will destroy you along with him if this gets to the footage stage. I'm offering you an exit. 1 conversation. No lawyers. Tonight. Come alone, and I'll show you exactly how deep this goes before you decide to blow up your own life for a man you met yesterday. Amelia read it twice. Diane, she said quietly. Change of plans. What is it? Amelia turned the phone around and let her read it, and watched Diane's face go from confusion to alarm. Amelia, no, that's a trap. You know that's a trap. She's isolating you. No lawyers come alone tonight. That's exactly what someone does when they can't win with the truth. Do not walk into a room alone with Eleanor Cho. I know it's a trap, Amelia said. Then, but I need to know what she thinks she has on Calvin. Amelia's jaw was set. She said there are things about him I don't know. Now I think she's bluffing. I think she's got nothing, and she's trying to scare me off the footage before I release it because the footage ends her. But think isn't no. And I will not release that footage. I will not drag Calvin into the middle of a war without being certain there's not a landmine under him I can't see. He's got a 7-year-old Diane. I'm not gambling that little girl's father on a probably. Diane was quiet. There's another reason, she said slowly, reading Amelia's face. Isn't there? It's not just tactical. You're worried it might be true. Amelia didn't answer right away, because Diane was right. Somewhere under the strategy, under the war, was a small, cold voice. The old voice, the fortress voice, the one that had kept her safe for 20 years by never letting anyone in. And that voice was whispering, what if he's not what he seems? What if the tired eyes and the daughter and the "have you eaten" are all part of it? What if you've spent a day and a half taking down your own walls for a con so good you can't see it? Everyone wants something. He must want something too. You've just been too tired and too grateful to see it. She hated that voice. But 20 years had taught her it was sometimes right, and the cost of ignoring it when it was right had been very high. I don't think it's true, Amelia said finally. Every instinct I have says he's exactly what he appears to be. But my instincts got Harold wrong for 20 years, Diane. I trusted a man for 2 decades and never once suspected he was hollowing out everything my father built. If I could be that wrong about Harold, a man I knew, how sure can I really be about a man I met yesterday? She looked down at the phone. So I'm going to go find out. I'm going to let Eleanor show me her worst. And if she's got nothing, then I'll know Calvin's clean, and I'll release the footage, and I'll burn her whole plan to the ground. And if she's got something real, her voice tightened, then I need to know that before I stake everything on him. Not after. And if it's a trap that has nothing to do with Calvin at all, Diane pressed, if she just wants you alone in a room so she can record you saying something or worse, then I'll be ready for that too. Amelia was already typing. I'm not as trusting as I look, Diane. I met one honest man this week. That doesn't mean I've forgotten how the rest of them operate. She hit send on a reply to Eleanor, and Diane watched her do it, and neither of them liked it. Fine, tonight. But I don't come to your ground. We meet somewhere public, somewhere neutral. And I don't care what you show me if you touch Calvin Brooks or his daughter, if you so much as breathe near that little girl. There is no exit you can offer me that I'll take. Name the place. Ah. The reply came fast. Predictable. Fine. The rooftop bar at the Meridian. 9 o'clock. And Amelia, bring your certainty about your new friend. You're going to want to hold on to it. You won't be able to. Amelia set the phone down. I don't like this, Diane said. I want that on the record. Whatever happens, I said I didn't like it. Noted. Amelia pulled her jacket off the back of the chair. Now here's what you're going to do while I'm gone. You're going to keep building. The whistleblower report, the timeline, all of it. Because whatever Eleanor shows me tonight, the truth about the transfers doesn't change. Harold ran a fraud. Calvin caught it 8 years ago, and I can prove it. That's real. That doesn't move no matter what game Eleanor plays. So you build the case, and I'll go find out what she thinks she's got, and tomorrow morning we put it together and decide whether we release the footage or something even bigger. She was almost to the door when her phone buzzed one more time. Calvin. Told Maya the truth. Kid-sized version of it. You know what she said? Amelia stopped, one hand on the door. What did she say? She said, so Daddy's not in trouble. Daddy's the good guy. And I said, yeah, baby. Daddy's the good guy. It just took people a long time to figure it out. And she thought about it for a second, and she said, then why are you sad? 7 years old. Saw right through me. A pause. Then I told her I wasn't sad. I was just tired. And she said I should ask the newspaper lady if she wants to have dinner because I smile more when I'm not by myself. I don't know where she gets it. She's never even met you. Anyway, whatever you're about to go do it. We're okay over here. See, Amelia stood at the door and read it and felt 2 things at once, and they pulled her in opposite directions so hard she had to close her eyes. The first thing was warmth. A warmth so sudden and so complete, It frightened her at the image of a 7-year-old telling her father to ask the newspaper lady to dinner, at the thought of a man who smiled more when he wasn't alone, at the whole impossible tenderness of a family that had let her a stranger this far inside in a day and a half. And the second thing was the cold voice, the fortress voice sharpened now by Eleanor's message. And what if all of it is bait? What if the child, the dinner, the you smile more? What if it's the most sophisticated con you've ever been played, and you're about to walk into a room where Eleanor Cho proves it, and you'll have to sit there and learn that the one real thing you found this week was the fakest thing of all? She didn't reply to Calvin. She couldn't not yet not with what she was about to go do. She just put the phone in her pocket, squared her shoulders in the doorway, and looked back at Diane. "If I'm not back by midnight," Amelia said, "or if you don't hear from me by midnight, you take everything we have, the footage, the transfers, the whistleblower report, all of it, and you give it to the lawyers and you tell them to go public with every word. Don't wait for me. Don't try to protect me. Just get the truth out. Promise me." Diane's face was pale. "Amelia?" "Promise me, Diane." "I promise," Diane said quietly. "But you come back. You hear me? You go find out what she's got, and then you come back. Because I have watched you rebuild yourself in 48 hours into someone I haven't seen in years, and I am not going to lose that in a rooftop bar to Eleanor Cho." Her voice wavered. "Whatever happened to you on that terrace, whatever that man reminded you of, it's worth more than the company, Amelia. So don't you dare go trade it away tonight." Amelia looked at her chief of staff, her closest thing to a friend inside these walls who had tried to call the police when she went dark, who had asked if she was okay, and meant the woman and not the company. And something in her chest ached with the understanding that maybe she hadn't been quite as alone all these years as she'd let herself believe. Maybe there had been people all along standing just outside the fortress waiting for her to open a door. "I'll come back," Amelia said. And then she walked out to meet Eleanor Cho on a rooftop at 9 o'clock, carrying the footage that could clear an innocent man the truth about an 8-year-old fraud. A warmth she didn't know how to hold, and a cold, whispering doubt she couldn't quite silence. Walking without knowing it yet, straight toward the moment that would force her to decide once and for all whether she was still the woman who trusted no one, or the woman a stranger had found crying on a terrace. And taught in a single night, she couldn't remember that some people are exactly what they seem. Eleanor Cho was already at the rooftop bar when Amelia arrived, sitting alone at a corner table with 2 glasses and a slim folder, and she smiled when she saw Amelia the way a card player smiles when the last player finally sits down. "You came alone," Eleanor said. "I wasn't sure you would. I said I would." Amelia sat. She didn't touch the glass Eleanor had poured for her. "You said there are things about Calvin Brooks I don't know, so show me. I don't have all night, and I'm not here for your company. Straight to it. I always liked that about you." Eleanor slid the folder across the table, but kept 2 fingers on it. "Before I open this, I want you to understand something, Amelia. I'm not your enemy. I know it looks that way. But everything I've done because I saw where the company was headed, and you didn't. Harold was going to take Whitmore down with him, and you were too close to see it. Somebody had to be ready. Somebody had to have a plan for the day it all came apart. That was me. I'm not the villain in this. I'm the only person who was awake." "You bought a photograph of me crying," Amelia said. "You called an ambush 32 minutes before it went public. Don't dress it up. Show me the folder or don't." Eleanor's smile thinned. She lifted her fingers. Amelia opened it, and for a moment, one long cold moment, the fortress voice in the back of her mind said, "I told you so." Because it was a personnel file. Calvin Brooks. Vance Holdings. And stamped across the top in the language of corporate records was a termination for cause. Misconduct. Financial irregularities. A man let go the file said not for reporting fraud, but for committing it. Discrepancies in the reconciliation system he'd built. Money that didn't add up traced back to the engineer who'd had his hands on the accounts. "There it is," Eleanor said softly, watching Amelia's face. "Your honest man, your whistleblower, That's not what the record says, is it? The record says he was the one moving the money, and he got caught, and Harold Vance did him a kindness by letting him quietly resign instead of pressing charges. The whistleblower story is one he tells. This is what actually happened. So before you go release your footage and stake your entire company on the good character of Calvin Brooks, I wanted you to see who you're really defending. A man who did the exact thing you're now accusing Harold of. A thief, with a very sympathetic daughter. Amelia looked at the file for a long time, and then slowly she did something Eleanor did not expect. She laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was quiet, almost tired. But it was real, and it wiped the confidence clean off Eleanor Cho's face. "You know what the problem is with a forged file, Eleanor," Amelia said, closing the folder and pushing it back across the table. "The problem is, you have to forge it before you know what your opponent has. And you made this, or you had someone make this sometime in the last 2 days, when you realized Calvin Brooks might become a sympathetic figure instead of a nameless con man. You built a termination for cause to bury the whistleblower story before it could get out." She leaned forward. "But you made one mistake. You didn't know that 8 years ago Calvin filed a formal report, a regulatory filing, with a date on it. And that date is 4 months before the termination in your pretty folder. He reported the fraud in the spring. They fired him in the fall. You can't be fired for cause in November for money you already blew the whistle on in July. The timeline doesn't work. Your file is a lie, and it's a lie I can prove is a lie, because the real paper trail already exists, and you didn't know it did." Gide-chan. Eleanor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're bluffing," she said. "There's no report." "There's a report," Amelia said. "My legal team pulled it this afternoon. It's buried in a regulatory archive exactly where a report goes when a company wants it to disappear. Calvin Brooks flagged the Vance Holdings transfers in writing through the proper channels months before they invented a reason to get rid of him. And the mechanism he described 8 years ago is the same mechanism Harold used to rob me for the last 6. So here's what I actually have, Eleanor. I have a whistleblower with a dated filing. I have the current fraud that proves he was right. I have footage that proves the photograph is a lie. And now, she tapped the folder. I have you sitting across from me, handing me a forged personnel record, which is a crime, which I will also be able to prove, because forgeries have fingerprints, and you were in such a hurry, you left yours all over this one. The rooftop was very quiet. "You didn't come here to be shown anything," Eleanor said slowly, and something had changed in her voice, the confidence gone replaced by the first thin edge of fear. "You came here to see if I'd overplay my hand. You wanted to know how far I'd go. And you just handed me a forged document on your own initiative in a semi-public place after summoning me alone under false pretenses." Amelia stood buttoning her jacket. "Thank you, Eleanor. Truly. I came here worried I'd have to fight you for months. You've made it a matter of days." She looked down at the woman who had spent 2 years sharpening a knife for her. "You said you were the only one who was awake. Maybe you were, but being awake isn't the same as being right. Harold did a terrible thing and told the truth on his deathbed. You did a terrible thing and forged evidence to cover it. There's a difference between those two men, and I've learned this week to see it. One of them I'll grieve. The other one I'll bury." She left Eleanor Cho sitting alone at the corner table with 2 full glasses and a folder full of lies, and she took the elevator down, and the moment the doors closed, she pulled out her phone, with hands that were. She noticed distantly shaking with relief. She called Diane first. "I'm out. I'm fine." She forged a file, Diane. She actually forged a Vance Holdings termination and handed it to me across a table. I have it. It's a felony, and it's a bigger gift than anything on the footage. Get the lawyers. We move tomorrow. All of it that transfers the whistleblower report the forgery. We don't wait the 72 hours. We attack in the morning. "Oh, thank God," Diane breathed. "You came back." I came back, and then in the elevator alone before she'd even reached the ground floor, Amelia did the thing she'd been unable to do for 2 hours, the thing she hadn't let herself do while the cold voice whispered that Calvin might be a con. She let herself feel the shame of having doubted him at all, because she had doubted him. Sitting across from Eleanor, opening that folder, there had been one terrible second where the fortress voice had said, "See, I told you everyone wants something," and she'd almost believed it. She'd almost let 2 decades of learned suspicion undo the one true thing she'd found. And the only reason she hadn't was a date on an old filing of fact, a piece of paper. Not faith. Facts had saved her from her own doubt. And a man like Calvin deserved better than to be believed only because the paperwork checked out. She called him. He answered fast. "Amelia, it's late. Everything okay?" "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to let me get through it before you say anything, because it's not easy for me." "Okay. Tonight, I met with the person who's been trying to destroy me, and she showed me a file that said you weren't a whistleblower at all. It said you were the thief. It said you were the one who stole from Vance Holdings and got caught, and the daughter and the shop and all of it was just a good man's cover for a bad man's history." She took a breath. "And for 1 second, Calvin, 1 second I believed it. After everything. After the terrace. After you asking if I'd eaten, after your little girl telling you to ask the newspaper lady to dinner. For 1 second I sat there and thought maybe I've been played. And I need you to know that, because you've been nothing but honest with me from the moment I grabbed you by the collar, and you deserve to know that I wasn't as certain of you as you were of me. I doubted you, and I'm ashamed of it." The line was quiet. "Amelia," Calvin said gently, "of course you doubted me. Don't make it easy. I'm not making it easy. I'm telling you the truth, same as always." His voice was steady, warm, without a trace of hurt in it, and somehow that made it worse. "You trusted a man for 20 years, and he hollowed out everything your father built. Of course you doubted the stranger from the terrace. If you hadn't doubted me, if you'd just taken a man you met 2 days ago completely on faith after what Harold did to you, I'd be worried about you. Doubt isn't the opposite of trust, Amelia. It's part of it. You doubted me, and then you checked, and the truth held. That's not a betrayal. That's just what it looks like when a careful person decides to believe someone anyway." Amelia stood in the elevator and her eyes were stinging, and she didn't fight it this time. "The file was forged," she said thickly. "Everything it said about you was a lie. And I can prove it because you filed that report 8 years ago, and the date clears you completely. You've been carrying this for 8 years, Calvin, everyone thinking you were either a fool who threw his career away, or if Eleanor had gotten her way, a thief who deserved it. And tomorrow I'm going to stand up in front of the whole world, and I'm going to make the record say what it always should have said, that you found a crime, that you told the truth, that they destroyed you for it, and that you were right the whole time." She heard him breathe unsteady. "My wife believed me," Calvin said quietly. "Sarah, she was the only one. Everyone else thought I'd lost my mind walking away from that career, ruining us over a principle. But Sarah, she held my hand in the worst of it, and she said you did the right thing, and one day somebody's going to know it. She died believing that. She died before anybody knew it." His voice cracked. "And now you're telling me that day's actually coming. 8 years later. I wish she—" He stopped. "I wish she could have seen it," he finished. "That's all." Amelia pressed her hand to her mouth. "Then we'll make it count," she said. "For her. For Maya. For 8 years of you carrying this alone. Tomorrow, Calvin. Tomorrow the whole thing turns." They ended the call, and Amelia went home, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept, really slept deep and dreamless, and woke before her alarm, with her mind clear and her course set. The next 72 hours moved like an avalanche. The lawyers filed first thing. The regulatory report surfaced with Calvin's name and its 8-year-old date, and the moment it did, the story the internet had been telling turned inside out. Diane's timeline connected the mechanisms, transfer by transfer, the 8-year-old fraud, and the 6-year one, the same fingerprints on both. And when it was laid out plainly, even the outlets that had called Calvin an opportunist couldn't spin it. The security footage went to the board, not the public. Amelia decided that in the end, and it surprised even her. She'd been ready to release it, ready to let the whole world watch her break at a railing to save Calvin's name. But she didn't have to anymore. The report cleared him. The forgery damned Eleanor. And the footage it turned out she could keep, could hand to 12 people in a boardroom, instead of to the entire country, and let them see with their own eyes the truth of that terrace without turning her worst moment into public property. She showed it to the board on the third morning. They sat in the same room where Eleanor had moved to have her removed, and Amelia played 2 hours of footage compressed into 10 unbearable minutes, a woman falling apart at a railing, and a man who stopped when he could have walked and stayed and asked nothing. And when it was done, the room was silent, and Amelia stood at the head of the table in her chair and did not flinch. "That's the scandal," she said. "That's the whole thing you called an emergency session about. A woman at the worst moment of her life, and a decent man who kept her company. Now let me show you the rest." And she laid it all out. Harold 6 years. Calvin's report from 8 years back. The same mechanism twice. And finally, last Eleanor's forged file, the felony committed in a rooftop bar in a panic to bury a whistleblower a second time. When she finished, Bill Hartley was the first to speak. "Where's Eleanor this morning?" the old man asked quietly. "She resigned an hour ago," Amelia said. "By email. I expect that's the last we'll hear from her that doesn't come through an attorney." The vote that day was not close. They did not review Amelia's fitness. They gave her a mandate, full authority to unwind Harold's damage, to restructure, to steer the company through the storm he'd left behind. Marcus Reed, who had seconded Eleanor's motion so fast 3 days earlier, was quietly asked to consider whether he still wanted his seat, and quietly decided he did not. And Harold. Amelia went to see Harold Vance alone in the end, on a gray afternoon at the house he'd lived in for 40 years. He was thinner than she remembered gray, in a way that had nothing to do with age, and when he opened the door and saw her, his eyes filled. "You came," he said. "I came. I thought you'd send lawyers. I deserve lawyers." "You do," Amelia said. "And there'll be some. What you did doesn't get erased because you're sick, Harold. 6 years. Everything my father built. I have to make it right, and making it right means you answer for it, and I won't pretend otherwise." "I know." He gripped the doorframe. "I know, Amelia. I'm not asking you to spare me. I told you the truth at the end. That has to count for something. Not enough to save me, but something." "It counts," Amelia said quietly. "There's a man, you don't know his name, but you ruined his life 8 years ago for finding what you were doing. Calvin Brooks. You had him fired for reporting the same fraud you eventually used on me." She watched the recognition, then the shame move across the old man's face. He spent 8 years thinking nobody would ever believe him. His wife died believing him and never got to see him proven right. You did that, Harold. Him first, me last. A whole line of people you hurt to keep a lie going. Harold closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God help me, I'm sorry." "I know you are." And she did know it, and that was the terrible part. The part that let her stand there and grieve a man she also had to bury. Telling the truth at the end doesn't undo the lie, Harold. But I'm glad you told it. Because if you hadn't, if you'd let it collapse on its own after you were gone, I'd never have been on that terrace. And I'd never have met the man you tried to destroy. And I'd have gone right on being exactly what I was becoming. Alone at the top, trusting no one, sure that's just what it costs. Her voice softened against all her intentions. You broke something in me the night you confessed, but something else got in through the crack. So there's that. For whatever it's worth to a dying man, there's that. She left him in the doorway of his old house, and she did not look back, and she cried in the car for the second time in a week. And this time she let herself all the way home, for the man Harold had been before he became the man who robbed her, and for her father, and for 8 years of a stranger's stolen name. Then she wiped her eyes, and she drove to a small repair shop across the city, where a man was closing up for the evening, and a little girl was doing homework on the counter to tell them both in person that it was over, that the story had turned, that the name was cleared, that the war was won. The bell over the door of the repair shop rang when Amelia walked in, and the little girl at the counter looked up first. She was small for 7, with her father's serious eyes, and a pencil in her hand, and a math worksheet spread out in front of her under the fluorescent light. She studied Amelia the way children study strangers, openly, without apology, and then she said, "Are you the newspaper lady?" Amelia stopped just inside the door. "Maya," Calvin said, coming out from the back with a rag in his hands, and there was a warning in it, gentle, the sound a parent makes when a child gets close to something delicate. "That's not—" "It's okay," Amelia said. She looked at the little girl. "I'm not from the newspaper. My name is Amelia. I'm a friend of your dad's." Maya considered this. "You're the one from the pictures," she said. "The ones outside the store. Daddy said you were sad, and he sat with you." "Maya, that's true," Amelia said quietly before Calvin could stop it. "I was very sad. And your dad found me, and he sat with me, and he made me feel better. He didn't have to. Most people would have walked right past, but he stopped." Maya nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already worked out on her own. "He does that," she said. "He stops for people. One time a man's car broke and Daddy fixed it for free, and we couldn't get pizza that week. Mom used to say Daddy's got a soft heart and an empty wallet." She said it matter-of-factly, the way children hand you the deepest truths about their families without knowing they're doing it. And then she looked back down at her worksheet, as though she hadn't just cracked Amelia Whitmore's chest wide open. Calvin set the rag down. "Maya, why don't you finish your math in the back? Give me a minute with Amelia." "Is it grown-up talk?" "It's grown-up talk." Maya gathered her worksheet and her pencil, with the practiced sigh of a child who has heard those words many times, and she slid off her stool, and on her way past Amelia, she stopped and looked up and said, "Are you going to be sad again?" Amelia crouched down, so they were eye to eye. "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight I came to tell your dad some good news." "Good news like what?" "Good news like the people who were saying mean things about your dad are going to stop. Because everyone's about to find out what I found out. That your dad is one of the most honest men I've ever met, and a long time ago he did something very brave, and now everyone's going to know it." Maya thought about this for a long moment. Then she leaned in close, conspiratorial, and whispered, "I already knew that." And she padded off to the back room, leaving Amelia crouched by the counter, with her eyes burning, and her whole careful composure in pieces, on the floor of a small repair shop. Calvin waited until the back door clicked shut. "She likes you," he said. "That's not nothing. She doesn't warm to people fast. Not since—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Amelia stood and smoothed her jacket and pulled herself back together the way she'd pulled herself together 1,000 times. Except this time, it didn't quite take this time. There was a warmth underneath that wouldn't be smoothed away. "It's over, Calvin," she said. "That's what I came to tell you in person. Not by text, not by phone. In person because you deserve that." She took a breath. "The report's public. The one you filed 8 years ago. It's out there now with your name on it, and the date on it, and the whole story's turned. They're not calling you an opportunist anymore. They're calling you a whistleblower. The man who caught the fraud before anyone. The one they buried. There are pieces running tonight. Real ones, true ones, about what actually happened to you at Vance Holdings, and what Harold did to keep it quiet, and how the same crime he committed against you 8 years ago is the one that came for me." Her voice steadied. "You've got your name back. The real one. The one they took." Calvin didn't say anything for a moment. He put a hand on the counter as if he needed it. "Just like that," he said. "Not just like that. It took a war, but yes, it's done. And the woman, Eleanor, the one who forged the file, resigned, under investigation. She committed a felony in a rooftop bar because she panicked, and it's going to cost her everything she was trying to protect." Amelia allowed herself the smallest, hardest smile. "She spent 2 years building a knife for me. She'll spend a lot longer than that answering for the last 3 days. And Harold? The smile faded. I saw him this afternoon, Amelia said quietly. At his house. It's real what I told you. He doesn't have long. There'll be consequences, legal ones, and I won't stop them because 6 years of what he did doesn't get erased by a diagnosis. But I went to see him. She stopped. The man he was to my father. I owed him a face-to-face even after everything, and I told him about you. That the first person he destroyed was a young engineer with a sick wife and a baby daughter who told the truth and paid for it. I made sure he heard your name before the end. I don't know if that matters, but I wanted him to carry it. Calvin was quiet. I don't hate him, he said finally, and Amelia looked up surprised. I want to. God knows I've got the right to. He took 8 years from me. He took years where I could have Sarah, and I could have had money for better doctors, better treatment. I could have... His voice caught, and he pushed through it. But I've spent a long time being angry at a man who didn't know my name, and didn't lose one night's sleep over me, and all it ever did was cost me sleep. So no, I don't hate him. I feel sorry for him. He's dying with all of that on him, and I get to close up my shop tonight and go home to my daughter with a clear conscience. I'd rather be me, even poor. Even after all of it, I'd rather be me than him. Amelia looked at him for a long moment. That's the difference between you and everyone I've ever known, she said. You keep choosing to be the person who can sleep at night, even when it costs you. You did it 8 years ago, and it cost you your career. You did it on that terrace, and it cost you your privacy. You're doing it right now, forgiving a man who ruined you, and it costs you the satisfaction of hating him. And every single time you choose it, like it's the easiest thing in the world. It is the easiest thing in the world, Calvin said. It's just not the cheapest. And Amelia laughed, a real laugh surprised out of her, because that was it. Wasn't it that was the whole thing about him in 6 words? The easiest thing, just not the cheapest. She had spent 20 years buying the cheap thing over and over, the safe thing, the guarded thing, and calling it strength. And this man in a repair shop with an empty wallet had been quietly paying full price his whole life and sleeping like a baby. There's something else, Amelia said. And this is the part I've been trying to figure out how to say all the way over here. She took a breath. The company's setting up a whistleblower fund. In your name, not charity. I know you won't take charity. Don't give me that look. It's a legal settlement. Vance Holdings folded into a company we later acquired, which means Harold's original fraud, the one you caught, is technically our liability now. You were wrongfully terminated for making a protected disclosure. That's not a gift, Calvin. That's a debt. My company owes you 8 years of a career you should have had, and I intend to pay it, because that's what an honest company does when it finds out it inherited a wrong. Calvin's jaw tightened. Amelia, before you argue, it is not enough to make you rich. I know you don't want that, and honestly, I don't think it'd be good for you if you had it. But it's enough to make you safe. It's enough that you never lie awake, counting 6 weeks of savings again. It's enough that if Maya wants to be a doctor, or an engineer, or an astronaut, or whatever a 7-year-old decides she wants to be next Tuesday, the money won't be the thing that stops her. Her voice softened. You gave up a career so she'd grow up with a father who was there. Let the career you gave up pay her way now. That's not charity. That's just the debt finally coming due 8 years late. Calvin was silent for a long time. He looked toward the back room where the light spilled under the door, and a 7-year-old was doing her math. For her, he said finally. Not for me. I'll take it for her. For her, Amelia agreed. That's the only way you'd take it, and I knew that, and I planned it that way, so we're both getting exactly what we wanted. He laughed and shook his head, and rubbed a hand over his face, and when he lowered it, his eyes were wet. You know what the strangest part of all this is? He said. 2 days before that terrace, if you'd told me a billionaire CEO was going to walk into my shop and set my whole life right, I'd have said you were selling something, because that doesn't happen. People like you don't stop for people like me. That's not how it works. He looked at her. But you did stop. Not on the terrace I stopped for you that night. But everything after. You didn't have to do a single bit of it. You could have cleared your own name and let me sink. You could have released a statement that threw me under the bus and saved yourself 4%. You could have done what everybody in your world would have done, and you didn't. You went to war for a man you met on a Tuesday. Why? Mianjin. Amelia opened her mouth and then closed it. Because the easy answer, because it was the right thing, was true, but not the whole truth. And Calvin Brooks had never once given her less than the whole truth, and she wasn't going to start shortchanging him now. Because you saw me, she said. On the terrace, before you knew who I was, before there was anything to gain. You saw a person who was hurting, and you stopped, and you stayed. She swallowed. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone saw me? Not the CEO, not the company, not the fortune or the fear or the face on the magazine, just the person. I've been famous for 20 years. Calvin and I have never been more invisible in my life. Everyone looks at me and sees what they want from me. You looked at me and saw somebody who needed someone to stay. Her voice was thick now, and she let it be. I didn't go to war for a stranger. I went to war for the first person in 20 years who looked at me and saw a human being. That's worth a war. That's worth 4%. That's worth more than the whole company if it comes to it. The shop was quiet. Somewhere in the back, a pencil scratched on paper. Amelia, Calvin said very gently. I have to ask you something, and I need you to not run from it, because I've watched you run from soft things for 2 days, and I think you do it so fast, you don't even know you're doing it. I don't run. You ran from "you're not a company" in the hotel. You ran from Maya asking if you'd be sad again. You're getting ready to run right now. I can see it. You've got your keys in your hand. He nodded at her fist, and she looked down, and she was, in fact, gripping her car keys, ready to go, ready to deliver the good news and leave before anything got too close. She made herself set them on the counter. Okay, she said. Ask. What happens now? Calvin said. Not to the company, not to my name, to this. You and me and that kid in the back who already decided she likes you. Because I know how these stories are supposed to end, Amelia. The rich lady sets everything right and drives back to her tower, and we all learn a nice lesson about not judging people. That's the clean version. That's the version where you don't get hurt. He held her eyes. But I don't want the clean version. I've had a lot of clean, careful years since Sarah, keeping my head down, keeping it just me and Maya, not letting anybody close, because close is how you get hurt. And I'm too tired for careful anymore. So I'm going to be brave for once, instead of careful, and I'm going to ask you plain, is this the end of the story, or is it the start of one? Amelia stood very still. Every instinct she had, 20 years of them, screamed at her to reach for the keys. To say something graceful and final. To protect herself the way she'd always protected herself, to keep the door of the fortress shut. Because open doors are how you lose everything. Because she had trusted Harold for 20 years, and look what trust had cost her. But she thought about a terrace, and nobody should have to carry the whole world alone, and a man who'd asked if she'd eaten, and a little girl who'd said you smile more when she's around about a woman she'd never even met. And she understood, standing in that small shop under the fluorescent light, that the fortress had never actually kept her safe. It had just kept her alone. 20 years of walls, and all they'd done was make sure that when Harold's betrayal finally came, there was no one standing beside her to catch her when she fell. No one except by pure accident, a stranger on a terrace who didn't know the rules of her world and stopped for her anyway. I don't know how to do this, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I want you to understand that. I'm very good at a lot of things. I can run a company. I can win a war. I can walk into a room full of men who want my chair and walk out with all of them afraid of me. But this a real thing, a person, I don't know how to do this, Calvin. I've never done this. I never let myself. I don't know if I can. I'm not asking you to be good at it, Calvin said. God knows I'm not good at it either. I've been alone 3 years, and I'd forgotten how to want anything for myself. My own daughter had to tell me to ask you to dinner. He smiled small and crooked. I'm not asking you to know how. I'm just asking you to try. To not drive back to the tower and turn this into a nice clean lesson. To stay a little. See what happens. That's all. Where I'm from, you don't have to know how the whole thing ends to take the first step. You just have to be willing to find out. Amelia looked at him. And then slowly, deliberately, she picked her keys up off the counter, and Calvin's face flickered just for a second with the beginning of disappointment, and she put them in her pocket where they couldn't be an escape route, where she couldn't grab them on reflex and run. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I'm just putting them somewhere I can't use them as an excuse." Calvin let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Amelia said. And then before her nerve could fail, Maya said something about dinner, about how you smile more when—" She stopped mortified, 20 years of composure abandoning her, completely reduced to a woman who couldn't finish a sentence about dinner. "I don't know why this is so hard. I've closed billion-dollar deals with less trouble than this. Because the deals didn't matter," Calvin said gently. "This does. That's the whole difference. The hard ones are the ones that count." He took a step closer, just the same careful distance he'd kept on the terrace, so she'd never feel cornered, and she noticed it, and she understood that he'd been doing it the whole time all along, giving her room to run right up until she chose not to. "Have dinner with us, Amelia. Nothing fancy. I make a decent spaghetti, and Maya'll want to show you every drawing she's made since September. It won't be a billion-dollar anything. It'll just be a Tuesday. But you'll be at the table, and there'll be people there who are glad you came, and you won't have to be Amelia Whitmore, CEO, for a single minute of it. You can just be Amelia. The person. The one I saw on the terrace." He held out his hand, not to pull her, just to offer. "Start there. See what happens." Amelia looked at his hand. And she thought about all the hands she'd shaken in 20 years. The deals, the boards, the men who wanted something, the careful choreography of power. Every handshake, a transaction. Every one of them, measuring what she could give and what they could take. She had shaken 1,000 hands, and not one of them had ever simply been offered with nothing behind it. No angle, no ask, just a man saying, "Stay." She took it. "Okay," she said. "Spaghetti. And I want to see every drawing, all of them, even the ones from September." And in the back room, right on cue, the door cracked open, and a small, serious face peered out, and Maya said, "Is it done being grown-up talk, because I finished my math and I'm hungry, and I want to know if the newspaper lady is staying for dinner?" Calvin laughed, and it was the sound of a man setting down something he'd carried for 3 years. "She's staying, baby, and she's not the newspaper lady. Her name's Amelia." "I know," Maya said with the particular scorn of a 7-year-old for the slowness of adults. "She told me already. I'm just testing if you knew." She looked at Amelia. "Do you like spaghetti?" "I love spaghetti," Amelia said, and found to her own astonishment that it was true. "Do you want to see my drawings?" "More than anything in the world." Maya beamed a wide, gap-toothed, complete beam. The beam of a child who has decided about you, and doesn't hold anything back once she has, and she ran to Amelia and grabbed her hand. The free one, the one Calvin wasn't holding, so that for one moment, Amelia Whitmore stood in a small repair shop, holding a man's hand on one side and a little girl's hand on the other, tethered to the world by 2 people who wanted nothing from her but her company, and she thought her heart might simply stop from the fullness of it. They had dinner that night, and the spaghetti was, in fact, decent. And Maya showed her every single drawing, including the ones from September, narrating each with total commitment. And Amelia, who had eaten at the finest restaurants on 4 continents, who had been served by chefs whose names meant something, could not remember a meal in her entire life that had tasted like that one at a small table under a plain light with tomato sauce on the good napkins and a child's artwork spread across every surface. The months that came after did not turn either of them into someone else. That was the thing Amelia would marvel at later looking back. She kept expecting the story to demand a transformation for Calvin to be pulled up into her world, given a corner office, a driver, a title remade into the kind of man who belonged on the arm of a CEO. And it never happened. Calvin kept the shop. He kept waking before dawn to take Maya to school. He kept fixing appliances and electronics and whatever people carried through his door. And when the whistleblower fund made it, so he didn't have to worry about money, he didn't buy a bigger shop or a nicer car. He hired a second man who'd been out of work and started fixing things for free again, for the people who couldn't pay, and stopped having to skip pizza to do it. He was in every way that mattered exactly the man Amelia had grabbed by the collar on the worst morning of her life. That was the whole point. That was why she loved him. Not because he changed to fit her world, but because he never once considered it, and in refusing to, he taught her that her world had been the small one all along. And Amelia was still the CEO. She was still powerful, still respected. Still when she needed to be still capable of walking into a room full of men and walking out with all of them, a little afraid of her. She unwound Harold's damage transfer by transfer and steadied the company, and the 4% came back, and then some, because it turned out the market did buy her judgment after all. And her judgment, it turned out, was better now than it had ever been, because a woman who is not alone makes clearer decisions than a woman who is. But she stopped living like a person afraid of being seen. She stopped staying at the office until 11 because there was nothing to come home to. Now there was something to come home to. She left at 6 some nights, an unthinkable thing, a scandal in its own right in her old life, and drove across the city to a small apartment above a repair shop where a man was making dinner and a little girl was doing homework at the counter, and where the sound when she walked in was not her own footsteps on an empty floor, but a 7-year-old shouting, "Amelia's here," and a man looking up from the stove and smiling. The smile his daughter had told her about, the one he only had when he wasn't by himself. Harold Vance died that winter. Amelia went to the funeral. It was small. A man who spends his last years hollowing out the thing his best friend built does not die surrounded by crowds, and she stood at the back, and she did not speak, and she grieved quietly and completely. The 2 men, Harold had been the one who'd put a hand on her shoulder at her father's funeral and said, "I've got you, kid," and the one who'd spent 6 years proving he never really did. Both of them were real. That was the hardest lesson of the whole year, harder even than learning to hold a hand that was offered freely, that a person could be both, that the man who loved you and the man who betrayed you could be the same man, and that you had to find a way to carry both without letting either one be a lie. Calvin came with her. He didn't have to. The man had ruined his life, and no one on earth would have blamed him for staying home. But he stood beside her at the back of that small room, and when the grief finally cracked her open right there in public in front of people, the thing she'd spent 20 years making sure never happened, he didn't flinch, and he didn't fix it. He just put his arm around her the same as he had on the terrace, and let her cry against his shoulder, and asked nothing exactly as he had the first time on the night neither of them could remember. Except this time she remembered every second of it. That was what she thought about standing there, that the whole thing had started with a night neither of them could recall, 2 strangers waking in a room with a hole where the evening should have been terrified and suspicious, and certain the other one wanted something. And it had ended here, with her weeping openly into the shoulder of a man she'd have trusted with her life in front of anyone who cared to look unashamed, unafraid seen. The night they couldn't remember had given her the only thing she'd never been able to buy, negotiate, or win. It had given her a person who saw her. And once she'd been seen, really seen on a terrace at her lowest, by someone who had nothing to gain, she could never again go back to being invisible. On the drive home from the funeral, Maya asleep in the back seat, the city sliding past the windows, Calvin reached over and took Amelia's hand without a word, the way he did now, easily, like it was the simplest thing in the world, because for him it was. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Amelia said. And then, because it was Calvin, because he'd earned every true thing she had. "But I will be. I've got people now. That's the difference. I used to think being strong meant being able to survive anything alone. I spent 20 years getting very, very good at being alone, and I called it strength, and I was proud of it." She looked back at the sleeping child, then at the man beside her. "I know better now. Being strong doesn't mean you don't need anyone. It means you're brave enough to let them in. I had it exactly backwards my whole life. I had to wake up in a room I couldn't remember next to a man who wanted nothing to finally get it right." Calvin squeezed her hand. "Sarah would have liked you," he said quietly. I think about that sometimes. She'd have liked you a lot. She always said the thing about me was that I'd give everything away and forget to keep anything for myself. She'd have been glad I finally kept something. He glanced at her. You. She'd have been glad I kept you. And Amelia Whitmore, the powerful CEO, the feared negotiator, the woman who had built her entire life around control and learned at 38 in a hotel room she couldn't remember. That the one thing worth having was the one thing control could never buy. Held the hand of a repair shop owner in the front seat of a car with his sleeping daughter behind them, and understood finally and completely the truth that a stranger had tried to tell her on a terrace on the worst night of her life. Success and wealth could not save her. Power could not save her. All the control in the world could not save her. In the end, the person who saved her was not the one who could give her everything. It was the one who simply saw her and stopped and stayed. And that made all the difference in the world.